Hey everybody, Tekking101 here, and in today's video, I think it's pretty obvious what the discussion is going to be about. I mean, I think you could tell by the setup we have here, but in case you're one of my blind fans, don't worry, I got you covered. Today's video is, of course, going to be about Rebecca. That's right. The granddaughter of King Riku Dole III, the daughter of Scarlet, Colosseum warrior girl, the eater of the melon no me. That is what today's video is going to be about. Alright, so, okay, I'm gonna stop. You know what? Honestly, knowing me, that was a joke, obviously, but I could easily go off on a tangent and then just end up making a 20-minute video about Rebecca wearing all my law shit, so we should probably just stop that now. Okay, so when I did that Paramecia discussion video a few weeks ago, like 2 weeks ago, I was spotlighting a bunch of different Paramecia fruit users, trying to just tell you about the type and all that stuff. While I was doing research for that video, I started looking at all the weird devil fruits that exist in One Piece, and I started thinking to myself, like, man, I could make, like, separate videos all about some of these, because some of these are really out there, and I do plan on that. I plan on doing another, like, little explain series talking about various, very odd Paramecia devil fruit abilities. The ones that I know I'm doing for certain are, of course, Law's Ope Ope no Mi, which is what we're here today to talk about, but the ones I also want to talk about, I want to talk about Baron Tamago's Egg fruit, because that's one that a lot of people, it was just recently introduced, but a lot of people seem to be confused about that one, so I know I want to do that one, but if anyone else has any suggestions, like devil fruits you really want to see me spotlight, in the Paramecia class anyway, let me know below, and I'll discuss them. But, okay, so, today, Ope Ope no Mi, you know, I figured that was a good place to start, because Law is one of the most popular characters in the story. His devil fruit is very prominently featured. It's one of the few devil fruits that actually you get to see, like, have an actual appearance. Not every devil fruit we always get to see what it looks like. And, you know, I'm a huge fan of him. I have all this shit ready to go on standby, and it's just an OP fruit. It's an Ope Ope no Mi, that's an OP fruit. Right, so Law's devil fruit, when it was first introduced, man, let me tell you, that was weird, right? Because go back to the Sabaody arc, when Law first started pulling out his room and shambles shit, we're just sitting there like, what is this fruit? What does it do? What's it based on? Because it seems to have a bunch of random techniques. Law's Ope Ope no Mi is one of those devil fruits that have a very specific theme, but the various individual techniques of the fruit might seem very different from each other. For example, Law has the ability to transport two things in a specific space. He also has the ability to cut things up and sever them, but he also has electrical-based abilities, so you might be thinking, oh man, these techniques don't really click together. The theme of Law's Ope Ope no Mi is surgery, or the acts of being a doctor, or just look at the actual title of the fruit, the Ope Ope no Mi, the Operation Fruit. So, there you go. There's the origin of that. For this reason, if you're not really a doctor and you have the fruit, it's not going to be as useful as if you did have medical training. There's many people in the world of One Piece that revere the Ope Ope no Mi as the ultimate devil fruit. Not just because of its miraculous abilities that I've just explained to you, but also its ability to perform the ageless surgery, which we'll get to later down the line. This is one of those devil fruits that have a very... It's the same thing with the heal fruit. It has like a very specific ability that will cost the user his life or her life, but will, you know, create a very large effect in exchange. But yeah, so that's the point of the fruit, though. You have to have medical training, and, you know, if an average Joe had it, like me or you, not going to be all that useful. Well, then again, I don't know if you're an average Joe. You might be a doctor or going for, you know, medical degree, in which case, good luck to you. It's a lot of hard work. I have a friend who's a physician assistant, and, you know, even that is pretty hard. So, good luck to my aspiring medical students in my audience. Anyway, but let's take a deeper look at each one of Law's abilities that he utilizes in the story to get a better understanding of how his fruit operates. Okay, so the first technique that we need to know about, his prerequisite for pretty much every technique he uses, is his room technique. Room is his operating room. You can't have an operation, you can't have a surgery without an operating room. So this is the first technique he uses. It's very arguable that any technique that he has after this won't work unless a room is opened up first. The room's size is completely dependent on Law himself. However, the bigger he makes it, the more it fatigues him. The largest room we've ever seen him make technique was like the size of like, it could completely cover the entire mountain that he and Luffy were fighting Doflamingo and Treble on. He stated that he could make a room that big, but it would probably shorten his life somewhat. So it seems like he's able to create the size of it however, however big or small he wants it. The room itself is kind of like a bubble that he opens up that's like slightly blue tinged in the anime. It might very well be somewhat invisible in the manga. We're not exactly sure, but it does create like a specific space, and the Law can only use his powers within said space. But for all intents and purposes, while Law is inside of his room, he's more or less God. He can move shit around, he can swap places with people, he can rip out people's organs, he can transplant organs into other people, he can take objects and transport them into other people, he can mess with your personality and your emotions and your spirit, he can swap that out. It's just really crazy, all the stuff that he can do, and we probably haven't even seen the full extent of what he can do. But some of the techniques that he has utilized so far are his shambles technique, which allows him to, take body parts and objects and swap them out with each other. So the way he used this in Sabaody was there was a bunch of Marines in his room. He used his shambles, and then their arms and legs and their heads, they started flying off each other's bodies. They can't actually die from this. They don't actually feel pain from getting their body parts or even their heads separated. They can still move and breathe and everything like that. But then Law can take anything that's lying around, like a barrel or a rock or a cannonball, and he can like place it where your head was or something like that. He's even like done a little bit of a Cronenbergian kind of thing and swap out some body parts for others. So you had like, I'm gonna take these two arms, rip off your legs, and put these arms where the legs went, and then you have just a bunch of crazy dark Alice in Wonderland weird shit going on here that would probably appear in like a Saw movie or something. So that's one of the weirder ones he's used. Other techniques include his Tact ability, which allows him to basically manipulate gravity in the space of his room. He's able to take anything he wants in this space, and he's moving it wherever direction that he's pointing. He used this first to move an entire battleship up out of the water with very minimal effort. So I would believe he's probably fucking with gravity while he's in his space, so Tact up and then just lifts an entire battleship up. This is very handy for redirecting attacks, because let's say someone, shoots a cannonball at Law, he can open up his room and then like Tact, and then the cannonball would just shoom and just like zoom right out on the other direction. So very handy for redirecting attacks, and also very handy for taking your opponent off guard, because just because an attack is not necessarily being aimed at you, or just because the opponent aims an attack directly at Law, doesn't mean it's going to hit, or it doesn't mean it's going to miss. This is the technique he used to get Treble off of his guard. Treble had him pinned down with his mucus. It seems like Law, there's nowhere he can go, there's nothing, he can't move, it's fine, it's done. Treble's about to light him on fire and kill him, and then Law, all he had to do was just point up with his Tact, and then he had his fucking severed arm that was still holding his sword that just, got zoomed up through Tact and then split Treble up stem to stern with his Steerbin technique, which is, I would imagine, a technique he just kind of came up with on the fly, because most of the time he's probably not walking around with a severed arm. Yeah, let's talk about Law's sword. I think that's a good opportunity to discuss that. It's a curse blade. Its name is Kikoku. I believe that's how you pronounce it. It's Demon's Whale is the literal translation of it here. It doesn't have a rank, but it is a curse blade. Law uses this sword in conjunction with his Devil Fruit abilities a lot. There's a little bit of dirt on it here. Huh, I don't remember when I was using this, but clearly I got it dirty. But yeah, he uses this in conjunction with his Devil Fruit ability by moving it around, and like, the path that the sword is cutting will allow him to like better cut the, characters or the items he's trying to cut. Like I said, he doesn't actually use the sword to actually physically wound anybody. I think the only time that's ever happened is against Treble. Other than Treble, I don't think he's ever actually used the sword to like slice somebody's throat or like stab somebody with it. No, he used it one more time against Doflamingo, but I don't think it really worked all that well. So he uses it for that. He also uses it for a technique called injection shot. So he'll like line up the sword like this to his eye, and like a target will appear, and then it like, shoots out like a projectile, which will like inject the opponent with something. I thought it was like a technique that like a syringe, that's what it was based off of, so it would like, inject poison or some chemical into you. He uses it on Doflamingo, and it doesn't seem to really do anything, so it might just be a straight up just a long range thrust attack, very similar to like Brook's thrusting techniques that Ryuma uses, or Zoro's techniques that will like injure you but don't actually do anything to you, like in the terms of like poisoning you or anything. But that was a cool technique. Some other techniques that he's used, he doesn't use these all too much, but they're like supplemental, is his scan technique, which is cool. He opens up his room, and then inside of his room, he can like scan for any particular thing, I guess, that he's seen before or he knows about. He used this on Punk Hazard to scan for all the Den Mushi that the Marines had, and then he used his shambles technique to swap places with them, and so he could receive them that way that, they couldn't call for help. So it's like he opens up a room, scan, like, okay, there's 15 Den Mushi. All right, I'm just gonna shambles, swap, and then he grabs all the Den Mushi. So that's pretty cool. He can use that technique. There's also a technique called Amputate that he uses, which is also a technique that he uses in conjunction with shambles. I should have really stated that technique as first. So shambles is the main technique he uses to actually like separate like a person's body or something like that. And then shambles is the technique that he's actually using to swap everything around like a freaking crazy hurricane that's just switching everybody around in like absolute chaos. Amputate is the main technique he uses whenever he's like taking off somebody's arm or their head or something like that. That's like his main technique when using it, and that's the technique he uses in conjunction with his sword Kikoku. Then we have Mess, which is Scalpel. This is a technique he uses to actually remove people's hearts. Probably any organ he could do with this, but the only organ that we've seen him use for it so far is the heart. So he'll go up to you and, use Mess, and like a perfectly square-shaped hole will appear, and it'll like just plop your heart out the other side. And it's not like just the heart is by itself. It's encased in like a little kind of bubble, square, ice cube looking thing. And then Law can take this heart. And once again, the human that had the heart ripped out of is perfectly fine. They don't actually bleed. They don't actually have any immediate pain from having their heart popped out of them. It's just that Law now has the heart, and if he decides that I want to kill you, all he has to do is squeeze and crush the heart, and of course, then you don't actually have a heart anymore. Somehow the heart is still able to beat and pump blood in your body, despite it being separated from your body. Like I said, very weird Devil Fruit ability, and it's One Piece. What do you want? But I would assume that Law can use this this scalpel technique to remove any particular organ in your body. It doesn't have to be your heart. Honestly, if you really want to throw terror into the hearts of men, you could use it to remove their family jewels. I'm just saying, I would be more terrified, like, oh, you ripped out my heart, that's pretty scary. Oh my god, no! Not those, anything but those. You can take my liver. Fuck, you can take my brain. Wow, that would be weird, wouldn't it? Law, like, removes somebody's brain and has, like, their brain in a freaking, like, jar, and they could still walk around without actually having a brain. That would be weird. That would be really weird. Like, imagine that. Law removes your brain, it's still functional, but then you get shot in the head by somebody, and it's like, haha, I don't have a brain. That's clever. You need to do something with that, Oda. That might be a little bit too grotesque for One Piece, but you need to do that. You need to have, like Law's in the middle of a fight against somebody, and he takes out his brain and gives it to somebody else, and someone shoots Law right in the fucking head, and it's like, oh crap, Law's dead, but he's like, no, I'm not, because I removed my brain. I'm like, whoa! That would be pretty damn cool. Alright. There's also an ability that's been discussed that the Ope Ope no Mi does have, yet Law has just never used it, and that's the ageless surgery technique. This is the ability to, at the cost of the user's life. So if Law used it, he would die, but in exchange, he could bestow eternal youth onto any patient that he wants. So this might play into the story at some point. The only other devil fruit that really has this is the heal fruit that Mancherry has. It's a devil fruit ability that at the cost of one opponent's life, it manages to heal all wounds, no matter how life-threatening or how far along they are. They can heal pretty much anything. Even if they're at, like, death's door, they can bring them back, and then at the cost of, like, Mancherry's life. We know that there was a user that had the Ope Ope no Mi before Law. It was a certain doctor, and I don't know if it was ever discussed that that certain doctor used the ageless surgery on another character, and we have some immortal character walking around out there. I don't know who that'd be. I don't know. Maybe Kaido? There you go. So there's your tie-in right there. The previous user of the Ope Ope no Mi used the ageless surgery on Kaido, and then Kaido ended up as a mortal being, which would make sense given that Law is now in Wano Kuni, and Kaido is also in Wano Kuni. That could tie that back together. I think it's also important to mention that I don't really know if this means ageless surgery as in just eternal youth, because all eternal youth is that you'll stay young, and you could still die. Like, you're young, you can stay young until you're like 200, but if you get shot in the head, you're still gonna die. Very different from, immortality, which, allows you to just never die. So those two things they always get kind of confused, but I think it really is just the, it really is just the eternal youth thing, and then with Kaido, maybe Kaido, if that really is the receiver of it, Kaido is just so godly strong, and since he's always able to stay young, maybe there's something with that, or maybe it really does give you immortality. If Kaido does have that ability, he might legitimately be immortal, because he's been attempted to be killed many, many, many times before this. So yeah, it's pretty messed up, and I mean, that is kind of scaring me, because that seems like Oda is presenting a option to to have Law die at some point. Not die in, like, a way that, like, he was just killed by somebody, but, like, Law realizes he has to perform the ageless surgery on somebody, maybe because he cares about them enough, or, they spoke to him and, like, I have to do this for the betterment of the world, or in the memory of Corazon, or I don't know, but it seems like it's presenting that option there. So that's also a really powerful technique that Law does have in his toolbox that he could use at any time. Other techniques he uses here. Well, he has two really cool techniques, Radio Knife and Gamma Knife, that he used against Treble and Doflamingo. Radio Knife is a cool one. He charges up his sword with an electrical current, and then he proceeds to cut them directly with the sword. He doesn't actually do it from a distance like with Amputate. He's actually, like, slicing his opponent with his blade. Once again, they do not bleed, and they don't die on the spot. The kicker with Radio Knife is that actually electrically charges the opponent a little bit, so even if they're a Logia type, or even if they have a specific Devil Fruit ability that allows them to stick back together or reform themselves, they won't be able to do it, because the electrical, he's basically charging the opponent with, like, opposing electrical forces, or I guess the same electrical forces. So it's like the top half of your body is positively charged, and so is the bottom half, so two positives can't fit together, so even if you have an ability that could paste yourself back together like Treble did, it won't connect. So it's basically like a more permanent version of Amputate. However, this current does eventually wear off at some point, and they can fit back together again. Another technique he uses that involves electricity is countershock, and this is based off a defibrillator that doctors can use. So he doesn't use the sword for this, he just takes his hands like this, he leaves the thumb out like he's actually using a defibrillator, like how a doctor would actually use it, like, clear, and then just presses his hands right against the fucking opponent, and is like, countershock, and then just an entire electrical currents just run through them. We don't know how this works, if he can actually control the level of voltage or amperage that goes into the opponent, or if it's like a set amount. It's very similar to one of Eneru's techniques, his volley techniques, but we don't really know that much about it. He used this against one of it was Scotch and the Yeti Cool brothers. There we go. Yeah, he used it against one of them to knock them out. And these are like giant, like Yeti guys, and one countershock was enough to knock them out. So it's a pretty powerful technique that like fries your nervous system. That's probably what the direct attack is there. The last technique we see him use, and by the way, Law uses a shit ton of techniques in video games, but we're not here to talk about those. I know there was one called like, Catastrophe that he does, and there's like certain super moves that he uses, because Law's Devil Fruit is just so crazy and wacky that you can like just come up with a bunch of random techniques for it. Like right now I could, it's not really hard, like I don't know, there's a technique called stethoscope, where Law can just place his hand on you and then immediately knows all about your medical, your heart rate, your blood pressure, your brain activity. He could just put his hand on you and just know everything about you. Or MRI technique, does a brain scan on you. I don't know, those are techniques he probably could have, conceivably. But yeah, his last technique, his Gamma Knife, arguably his absolute strongest move that he has. He channels his doctor energy. He channels his doctor energy into his hand. It creates a knife in his hand. I'm assuming he could also use this with his sword, but he was kind of missing his arm at this point, so, you know. So he takes his Doctor Power green knife that he has in his hand, you know, stabs the opponent with it, and being contradictory to every other ability he has, this ability doesn't actually injure the opponent on the outside, doesn't actually do anything to you on the outside, it directly damages your internal organs. So, it's like a radiation knife, you know, so it's like actually causing harm to your internal organs while leaving your flesh untouched. So he uses this move against Doflamingo as like his trump card, like he thinks like this is the only technique I got that'll actually be able to kill this thing. Doflamingo is a thing, well, it kind of is. Charges up the knife and just proceeds to just stab the shit out of Doflamingo and just wrecking his internal organs. And the only reason Doflamingo was able to survive that, which I still think is bullshit, is, oh, I have the string fruit. So yeah, you punctured and destroyed all my internal organs or a bunch of my internal organs. I just used my strings to patch them up. We're good. Look. I'm not saying it doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense that Dofi would be able to do that. I'm just saying that even after Law proceeded to just like, lungs, heart, liver, stomach, just wrecking his internal organs, his internal structure in his chest area, everything in this torso, he's just wrecking. Doflamingo can just patch himself back up and then get right back up and like acting like he's really not all that injured. Like, at the very least, he should have been more injured than he was, and, like, he still fought against Luffy Gear 4. Like, he took a freaking, like, Kong gun and Calvarian and Rhino Schneider and a Leo Bazooka, you know, after having all of his internal organs just shredded and then, like, makeshiftly patched back up using his strings, he still tanked all those, like, high-octane attacks from Gear 4 Luffy. And he was still, like, you know, he got freaking pummeled into a wall by Leo Bazooka, and he just gets out like, I'm alright. You know? Like, I know Luffy was eventually able to take him down, but I'm just saying, like, after all the damage he took, it really should have taken, like, a few techniques from Gear 4 Luffy to drill him in for good. But we had to have the badass final scene with Luffy and the King Kong gun. I'm not complaining about that moment. That was a badass moment. I'm just saying it was apparently, like, Law's most strongest technique, strongest technique, and it really didn't even have, like, a lasting effect on Doflamingo. It didn't even really be like, oh man, Law really fucked me up, I gotta be careful in this fight against Luffy. None of that. So that's kind of lame there. But other than that, I'm sure there's a bunch of other techniques that Law has yet to show, that he has at his disposal, so I'm really looking forward to those. There's one more thing that he can kind of do, and this falls in line. This is the same as his shambles techniques, but he can use shambles to swap not just physical things, but also things like personality and like your spirit, I guess. He does this with the Straw Hats. He can, you know, open up his room and then swap around, you know, personalities, and then you have Nami in Frankie's body, and then, you know, Sanji and Nami's and stuff like that. You know, that's still the same technique as shambles. That's why I didn't bring it up, you know, earlier, but it's still an interesting thing to mention there. But yeah, I'm looking forward to Law. When we get to Wano, I'm looking forward to see what he's going to do now, what his attitude is going to be, really, more than anything, now that Doflamingo has been defeated, what his attitude moving toward, like this is the guy that he hated for so long, that killed Corazon, his benefactor, and now he's finally locked up, finally an impel down. He finally succeeded in taking him down in his criminal empire. I wonder how Law is really gonna be now, his character, how it's gonna develop from this point onward. Yeah, that's about it. Oh, yeah, I just realized, too, that this past 2 weeks, I've had 2 other videos that have had Law in the thumbnail, and this video is also going to have Law in the thumbnail, which, I mean, I'm not complaining, I'm just saying that new people coming to this channel, man, like, this guy really likes Law a lot. He's made, like, 3 videos about him in the past 2 weeks. I don't know. But yeah, thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoy, and leave a comment below on the next Paramecia video, next Paramecia ability that you would like me to discuss on the show here. Later, guys.